Go for it.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? What's going on, fellow technicians out there? Welcome to the shop. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Dynasty Diagnostic podcast. I'm glad to be back. My name is Eitan Mozia. As you already know, I am here with FF Stompy, Sam Lane himself. Mr. Sam Lane, you told me that you cut your hand in half this week.
In half.
You had to get a prosthetic, and now you are bionic, man.
I wish. That would have been a far more interesting story. Cut myself with scissors. Yeah, I'm a child. So had to get four. No, I was not. Four stitches in my thumb. I cut towards my thumb. So listen to your teachers, listen to your parents. Don't cut towards yourself. I need safety scissors. So if somebody wants to buy me and ship me a pair of those small safety scissors, go ahead and do that.
Don't you work in a lab all day? Like, I feel like you have specific safety rules that you need to abide by.
Well, I'm sure. That doesn't mean that we do. And you know, it's funny because my company's a startup. It's a small company. We've just now started getting into the more safety conscious side of things. And so we've developed like our safety programs and stuff, but I'm the first person to have to use the workman's comp program for us. So that was interesting. I was the guinea pig and there are some changes that need to be made. So I'm the guinea pig and I am the one that I guess is helping. I'm helping. Listen, I'm helping by hurting myself. Okay.
Man, I am just glad to be talking to my buddy again. I'm glad to be back on the show once more. I'm thankful and glad for you out there listening, and I'm ready to get excited and going into what we have going on today, which is kind of everything. I mean, right now, obviously, Rookie Talk is at the top of everybody's to-do lists, and for that reason, you're hearing a lot of things on rookies from a lot of people right now. We actually just had a couple of guests that went over rookies recently. We had Ray JQ Ray Garvin on just a few weeks ago. We had Zach from Dynasty Dummies as well a couple of weeks ago, kind of going over some of the rookies. We had kind of in our mind some idea of how these guys would test, what these guys would do, and what we thought their value would be based on those things, but it looks like things have kind of taken a turn. I mean, a lot of the wide receivers were really, really fast, but a lot of the wide receivers were also significantly slower than we thought they would be. Some specific ones, Jalen Reagor, for example, ran a 4.47, which, I mean, in most classes isn't a slow time and probably isn't really a slow time here, but nobody saw someone like Chase Claypool going out there and being faster, at least in a 40-yard dash with no pads in a straight line, than a guy like Jalen Reagor. Laviska Shenault potentially got injured at the combine. We've been hearing all kinds of crazy things happen. But I think the craziest of all things, and the only reason I'm even going to bring this up is because I know I can say this name and nobody else can, Albert Okwuegbunam. Albert Okwuegbunam is a boss. He has one of the highest speed scores that we've seen from a tight end in the last 10 seasons. This guy was burning people. And I know we've definitely had this conversation back and forth oftentimes where tight end isn't necessarily a position that you want to bank on coming out in that rookie year. If there's anybody to bank on in this class, I would say it's him. But there was also another tight end that had a ridiculous cone. Do you want to kind of elaborate on that a little bit more?
No. Hold on a second. I'm pulling up the numbers. Why is this not going to tight end? Jesus. Sorry.
No worries.
You're sounding a little echoey, by the way. I don't know if
I might be a little far from my mic.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm like trying to get the lighting and it's all bad.
You're talking about Mims, right?
No, Mims was the wide receiver. There was a tight end that got like a stupid 3-cone.
Oh yeah, it was Adam Troutman.
Adam Troutman.
All right. So yeah, normally, really, there's actually two guys that have very good three cones. Adam Troutman from Dayton, and Charlie Talmo Pouye. Don't know if I got that one right. From Portland State. But Adam Troutman, 6'7", 8" above guys like Juwan Johnson, Aaron Parker, Michael Pittman, Isaiah Hodgins, Freddie Swain. I mean, but that number, bananas. Like, I don't think you understand how laterally agile Troutman is. And we're talking about a big boy. It's not like these tight ends are small. He's 6'5", 250 pounds. So he's about the size of Noah Fant. Sorry. God, Eitan, this is what you've done to me. No Fant.
Pronunciation, man.
His agility score is in the 95th percentile. So, I mean, he's laterally quick. Now, the funny part here is 4.8 40. So straight line speed is trash. Lateral speed is fantastic. So, when you're beating all but one wide receiver, you're moving quickly, which tells me that he can be a short yardage, inside the seams type of pass catcher, like a Jason Witten somewhat, not going to give you big games, not going to give you big gains, but he can be reliable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I still think that there is some talent to be picked off from this class, but obviously, I mean, the thing on everyone's minds, all everyone wants to talk about right now is the wide receivers in this class.
Mm-hmm.
Wide receivers in this class look very, very good. I mean, I mentioned that Jalen Reagor ran a 4.47. I'm saying this like this is something that's bad. That's not, especially when you also put that with the rest of his attributes and the rest of his testing that show how explosive an athlete that he is. I really do think that he is probably wide receiver 3 in this class. But, I mean, Justin Jefferson kind of made a real name for himself with the numbers that he was able to post. He had a 4.43 himself. A lot of people kind of likened him to Keenan Allen, not thinking that he would run this fast from LSU, given a lot of what he's done kind of to Joe Burrow, saying, okay, well, he made this guy a really, really good receiver. I think we're seeing it all its own. And when you actually look at his production in college, Justin Jefferson kind of checks all the boxes that you would be looking for and doesn't necessarily have the same type of name recognition as Ruggs, as Reagor, and as some of these other receivers in this class. I think Justin Jefferson's going to be a guy that you could probably get, I don't know, closer to the end of the first round, maybe 107 and beyond, I would think.
It really depends.
In Superflex.
It really depends. Yeah, in Superflex, yeah, you're probably getting them later in the first. A lot of people came on to Jefferson this season, have him in his top 5, in their top 5. I believe I was listening to Dynasty Diagnostic the other day, and they were talking about their wide receivers, and I believe he might have been the second best wide receiver on a couple lists. Like, he came on, and for him to run as fast as he did, he ran a 4.43 40. Definitely got him noticed. Definitely jumped him up some boards. So definitely he's probably going to be, or no, he will be a top 5, probably a top 3 wide receiver in rookie drafts this season.
Now, was there a guy that kind of exceeded your expectations, or completely missed your expectations in this crop of wide receivers that you think maybe we need to look at a little bit more, or maybe stay away from a little bit more? Maybe he's the guy that you kind of want everybody else in your league to draft that you're not willing to take the leap on?
So the one, it's Henry Ruggs for me. And I mean, yes, he's extremely fast. 4.27, 99th percentile. 100 percentile speed, 40-yard dash, 90th speed score. The issue is he is extremely small. He's this class's DJ Chark in all intents and purposes. Well, there you go, Hollywood Brown too. But I say DJ Chark in that didn't didn't have fantastic numbers in college, showed burst, showed speed, but just did not have those numbers. But for some reason, we get, and I think probably people will be on him more because of Shark's breakout this last season. But we know, I mean, the guys that we listen to, so Peter Howard, Zach Reed, tell us that college production is a huge indicator of when a guy or if a guy will break out in the NFL. And that's, yes, he's very quick. We get it. But we've had guys like that. Darius Hayward-Bay is another example where he was extremely fast, but didn't do any amount to much in the NFL. And the way he's built, you just don't see guys like that. Tyreek Hill is the exception for all of this, exception to the rule. You don't have Tyreek Hills every day. Hollywood might be close to that. We'll see if he can be better this season with that foot healthy, but it's just hard to bank on guys like that. So while I think the speed's great, and I think it jumps him up boards. I think he might go in the top 10. There's a lot of speculation around the Denver Broncos right now going for Henry Ruggs, which I wouldn't actually mind that because he would be that outside speed receiver that they need. But
that's Tim Patrick, which is the role that he'd be taking.
I would rather have like Robbie Anderson. But point still stands is that you just don't have guys with this build that have been overly successful in the NFL, and that's a concern. And he didn't do it in college, which is a major concern for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely see where that's coming from. And yeah, you said that he was mocked to the Denver Broncos. I'd be much happier with saving that high pick and maybe going in a lower round for, somebody like AGG, or I really don't even necessarily think that the Broncos need a certain archetype at wide receiver. I think they already have their pieces kind of already there. Noah Fant provides a lot of speed. Cortland Sutton, while maybe he's not the fastest person in the world, he's a true number one wide receiver. So I think that all the Broncos really need is a complimentary wide receiver that's going to do well in that system. And for that reason, I think that you can kind of go a little bit lower with the picks. If there's one guy that kind of opened my eyes a little bit and made me think that maybe he's a little bit more than meets the eye, it's a guy I already mentioned, Chase Claypool. Obviously, we went through this about a season ago. The wide receiver out of Notre Dame came in the NFL with kind of a lot of with good athletic testing and a lot of fervor around them. Marquise Boykin. Is it Marquise Boykin? Miles Boykin. I don't know, failure to launch. I don't necessarily know if that's because of the system that he was in or if that's because maybe it just hasn't happened yet because he's going into his second year, which is probably the year that he's going to break out anyway. But, raw athleticism, size, speed. This guy is Mike Evans' size, running like he's, much smaller receiver. If anything is attractive, the size speed combination has to be the number one thing kind of at the forefront of your minds. And you might kind of say, yes, this fails a lot, but even NFL teams kind of draft based on this. Kenny Golladay was a size speed freak. Where size speed freaks come out every year, and though some of them fail inevitably, it's probably the safer choice rather than going for small receiver over small receiver over small receiver, because at least you can guarantee that, eventually these guys are going to at least get the opportunity to see if they belong in this league. And if they do, then that size speed is going to make them just another thing completely at that level. I really do think that you have to pay more attention to him. I think that the whole comping him to a T type thing, that has to be dead at this point once you look at what he was able to do. And I would think that a raw wide receiver that might need a year or two, that might fall later in your drafts, Chase Claypool is going to be a guy that maybe in 2021, 2022 is a guy that starts to come on as a really, really good buy in the late second, third round of your rookie drafts. I really do think that he can be somebody that is going to help you. But that's enough about wide receivers.
Well, hold on. I want to add one more here, because we haven't been hearing enough about this guy, but has had a fantastic combine. It's Donovan Peoples-Jones. He had horrendous quarterback play at Michigan, so he didn't really produce all that much. But his breakout age is 19.5, which is 77th percentile. We know that is a big indicator of breaking out in the NFL. His 40-yard dash was a 4.48. It was 76th percentile, but his speed score was 86th percentile. Burst score was 99th percentile. The dude is athletic. He's 6'2", 212 pounds. He measured in at 212 pounds. Big hands too. But if he gets a good quarterback, he has the athleticism to be, like you say, size speed, to be one of those size speed freaks that could be the possession wide receiver for a team. Could be that guy, could be that Demaryius Thomas, Des Bryant, Kenny Golladay type. He just didn't do it in college, but I don't blame that on him. I blame that on the quarterbacks and the system that he ran. So watch out for Donovan Peoples-Jones. I know I have not heard his name a lot this offseason, but he could be rising a lot of draft boards, and he would be a great second-round pick, a great shot to take in the second round.
I definitely agree with that as well. I would say there's probably one major surprise amongst the running back group, and it's the top story. It's going to be the top story everywhere, but we have to talk about it as well because it just happened. Jonathan Taylor just ran a 4.41. I mean, people were saying that Jonathan Taylor looked slow on tape. People were saying that Swift was by far the RB1 of this class. I don't think it's even a question now. No,
it's still a question for me. It's just
for me, it's not. For me, it's not a question that Jonathan Taylor is the RB1. If Jonathan Taylor is quote unquote a power back, which is kind of how he played in college and still has the speed, we're looking at Leonard Fournette all over again. And if you don't like Leonard Fournette, I hate to tell you, but it's not because of Leonard Fournette. It's because of the offensive line that Leonard Fournette found himself behind. Put Leonard Fournette on the Dallas Cowboys when Zeke was on the Dallas Cowboys, and I think you're seeing a lot more of what this type of size, speed, and power can do at the RB position. I think Jonathan Taylor has kind of ran away with this, and again, in Superflex leagues, outside of maybe the top two picks, I think he's definitely the first RB off the board. You mentioned that you had some disagreement with that. What would be your point of contention?
It's the pass catching. Now, he did put up great numbers. He put up his first 20-plus reception season this past season. But DeAndre Swift, to me, is still the number one. I don't think he did anything to hurt his status there. His pass catching has been phenomenal his entire career. Got 17 passes as a freshman, 32, and then 24. Now, Jonathan Taylor, fantastic. I think he is the number two in this class for me. But I feel like Swift is more dynamic, can do basically everything. I'm not saying that Jonathan Taylor can't do everything. I'm just saying that I know for sure that DeAndre Swift can do everything that's asked of him. So I guess it's not like this. Oh, I vehemently disagree. I just think that I know DeAndre Swift has done it every season. Jonathan Taylor finally had his first season of pass catching. Now we know Wisconsin doesn't use their backs in the pass catching role. But point still stands. I personally would rather have the guy that has caught passes in every season, has been efficient in every season. So ultimately this point could be moot and Jonathan Taylor could land with Kansas City Chiefs. And then, yes, he's definitely the RB1 in this class, but I personally still have DeAndre Swift number one.
All right. So we're going to move on to what is actually going on in the NFL this coming season. And some of the guys that you probably should be looking for, trying to buy any cheaper than, maybe consensus would have it. I think a guy that you could probably buy right now that has a really good chance of being a real difference maker next year in terms of being in the top 12 at his position is Calvin Ridley. Austin Hooper's gone. He wants $11 million a year at least from the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons don't have that money to pay him, even if they let that running back go and replace him. I think that Calvin Ridley this year is pretty much all lining up for him. I wrote about Calvin Ridley about a year and a half ago, kind of going into last season, saying that expectations needed to be tempered because of the sheer amount of competition around him. With Austin Hooper gone and him really assuming that number 2 role, if that defense is kind of what we've seen from that defense over the past couple of seasons, then we're really looking at an offense that's going to have extremely high volume. And Julio Jones can't catch every pass on that team. I really do think that, barring health, of course, Calvin Ridley is a guy that you need to start looking at as an A++ type asset in dynasty leagues. I think that he can be what everyone thinks that DJ Moore can be for you this year. I really do think that his potential is kind of right there, kind of for the taking, without having the added competition of having an established pass catcher like Austin Hooper to go ahead and continue to take some of those targets. The Mohamed Sanu trade was kind of the one thing that you saw that kind of gave you every indication that, okay, well, this team sees it in Calvin Ridley. With Austin Hooper gone, I think it's a whole different game. And I think that, he's probably going to be one of the guys I try to acquire most, even though that there's going to be expense to doing that. I think there comes a point in time where it still makes sense to pay asking price if asking price is going to continue to rise. Is there a guy out there that you think is not even necessarily inexpensive, but just out there, maybe not a gold star asset yet, that you think can become one this season, kind of in the same way that Kenny Golladay became one last season?
God, that's tough. I think probably Christian Kirk, if that's what we're talking about, that class. He had his injuries last year, but kind of took a step forward. If you've been listening to me this offseason in this short month that I've been back, I've been hammering home second-year wide receivers. So you need to heed that, because, let's just look at last year, for example. Michael Gallup, DJ Chark, Cortland Sutton, DJ Moore. I'm sure I'm forgetting people, but those 4 in particular, second-year wide receivers that took a gigantic leap forward. And I will keep hammering this home as well. Peter Howard has shown that second-year wide receivers have a higher percentage of breakouts in the NFL occur in a wide receiver second season than in the third. Now, the third season, there is still a significant amount of wide receivers that have produced or had their breakout season, but it's easier to acquire a guy before their second season and they have them break out than say, okay, well, we saw him break out in the second season and he's entering his third season. So acquire those guys. And that's guys like N'Keal Harry, Preston Williams, Paris Campbell, guys like that. But back to my main point that I started with, Christian Kirk, in 13 games, had 108 targets, 709 yards, only 3 touchdowns. But that was in 13 games. Now, Larry Fitzgerald is coming back. I understand, but you have another. You have a second year in a system with your quarterback. should help with that chemistry. And I think that Christian Kirk can be that third-year breakout that I was just talking about next year.
I love that idea. I just get the sense that Arizona isn't done at wide receiver, despite all of the draft equity that they spent at wide receiver last year. I really do think that they're going to be in the game in the free agent market for a guy like Robbie Anderson, for a guy that is going to continue to take targets away. I just think that in that system, it's a committee approach. It's supposed to be a committee approach. And for that reason, I don't necessarily know if I'm going to tie myself to that. That's not to say that Christian Kirk isn't good. I really do think that he can be a valued wide receiver too. I just don't necessarily see him becoming a gold star.
Well, I'm not going to say he's going to be a top 12 wide receiver. I'm saying he was second on the team in targets with 108 in 13 games. Larry Fitzgerald had 109, and it wasn't close after that. It was those two, and that's it. It was those two, and then big cliff to David Johnson, which is very odd to see. The next wide receiver was Damiere Byrd at 46.
And that's what makes me think that they're going to add.
And that's fine, but I mean, they still have three rookie or second-year wide receivers coming in: Keyshawn Johnson, Andy Isabella, and lest we forget Hakeem Butler. And so I'm still of the belief that they're still bringing these guys on. None of those guys really played a ton of snaps last season. Damiere Byrd was the one that played the third most snaps. Christian Kirk I felt like he proved himself as a valuable asset last season in 13 games. By the way, ranks number 9 in red zone receptions last year as well. 23rd in true catch rate as a second-year wide receiver. So it's not like it's out of nowhere. Like, he's a very good receiver. And again, he's going to be in a pass-happy system and his second season with a QB.
All right. So before we get into the breaking down the roster for this,
by the way, I have to throw this in here. Aton didn't create a show sheet, and so just bear keep that in mind here, because I think Aton's like freaking out in his head because he's like, I don't know what to do. Because as you've heard many a times on this podcast, people not make fun of him, but compliment him on his extensive show sheets. We literally do not have a show sheet, so we are just going off of our heads right now. I think it's a good discussion, but it's still pretty funny to me.
We're show sheetless today. We're just going for it. We're just absolutely going for it. The last thing I probably want to hit on is, I mean, obviously, you want to buy the dip in players. There's always a post hype. There's always a time when a player isn't valued the way that he should be valued. I think last year that we've all seen that player was and still is playing for Blake Bortles on the Bears, Allen Robinson. I think that player this year is a player that has been a very, very good NFL player for a long time, but has just found himself injured. And I honestly think that other than that, there really isn't anything that prevents him from being a valued top 24 asset again, potentially even a top 15 asset like he's been recently. I think Brandon Cooks is a guy that you should be actively going out and buying right now, despite the concussions. Now, I know a lot of people are going to come back and say, okay, well, he could stop playing at any given moment. But if you compare his concussion numbers to Devontae Adams' concussion numbers, I think you start to kind of get a lot of more comfortable with that situation. There are guys that are going to gut it and play it out. And I think that as long as he continues to have that role on that team, which is the deep threat, I don't think that another 1,100-yard season, 6 touchdowns is beyond him. And I think that that's somebody that you can probably get at wide receiver 36 plus numbers. And for me, that's a second round pick. That's something in that range. And that's definitely somebody that you should be buying. Now, is there a guy out there that you think maybe took a hit in this last season that going into this new season is probably somebody that you'd be actively targeting, thinking that, he could turn it around and be what he's been in the past, or be maybe just a version of himself that we haven't seen yet?
I mean, there's a couple that I'm looking at DLF ADP right now. There's a couple. They're actually 3 in a row that I'm seeing. AJ Green is going right after Brandon Cooks. I have actually picked him a couple times in startups because he's dropped so much. I mean, he's going as the wide receiver 43 right now.
What do you think is the future for AJ Green?
I don't know. I think it's a definitely a win now move, but the way I draft, and this is how I've always drafted, is I go RB heavy first, and then I pick wide receivers later. And in Superflex, it's definitely wide receivers at 5th round or later. And I think I'm only done 2 startups this offseason. Both have been Superflex, so I always stick with the I pick my first wide receiver in the 5th round or later. But if I'm going to win now, so for instance, I picked Dalvin Cook, I picked Aaron Jones, I picked Josh Allen, and I just forgot the other guy that I had. Oh, I had Dak Prescott and Josh Allen. So those are my 4 right now. If I can get a better wide, I don't want him as my wide receiver 1 because I think you need somebody much more trustworthy as a wide receiver 1. But if I can get him as a wide receiver 2 in a win now moment or a win now team, I think it's a great pickup because I don't think you're spending and really you could probably get him as a wide receiver 3. Let's be realistic. I think it's a great pick because that quarterback situation is going to be similar, or at minimum it will be the same, but probably be better. He should be coming back fully healthy. And I still think, I mean, his last season that he played, I mean, in 2018, he was a wide receiver 1 in the 10 games he played. So yes, it's a risk. It's definitely a risk, but I still think you can get top 24 wide receiver, maybe even a top 12 season next season, but a top 24 wide receiver over the next 2 seasons. And it seems like he's indicating that he wants to be back in Cincinnati as well. So it's risky. It's definitely a risk, but I believe that he still has it in him to have a top 12 season.
I can see that as well. It's just a question of health. And, with a foot, anything can happen. I honestly think that AJ Green is, like you think, one of the most undervalued assets out there right now for a team that is trying to win now, just because, I mean, we all know the potential that he has. At this point, it's just a matter of whether or not he can play. I don't even think you need 16 games from him. If he can play 12 games this season, I think you've made your money and profited with AJ Green.
So played 9 games in 2018, had 77 targets, 694 yards, and 6 touchdowns in 9 games. He was well on his way to another 1,200-yard season, it could have been a double-digit touchdown season, and then he got that foot injury. Full season off. He's had a full season off, should be healthy, should have a better QB situation than he possibly has ever had. Now, I guess he had Carson Palmer at the beginning of his career, didn't he? But still, the point is that he's older. He's still an injury risk. He's 32 years old, or will be this season. But I'm still taking that shot where he's going. The other guy that I wanted to bring up, post-hype sleeper, Curtis Samuel.
Absolutely.
Listen, he had a disappointing season last season, but look at the whole situation. I mean,
look at his air yards. Just start there.
That's another one. Look at his air yards, but look at the entire situation. It was a run-first offense with 2 bad QBs, and everybody will go, well, what about DJ Moore? Do you really think there was enough passing for anybody else but Christian McCaffrey and DJ Moore to be successful in that offense? Absolutely.
Not even only that. I think that a lot of people kind of think that there's this huge divide between DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel because of what happened last season. but you also have to kind of take context into it. DJ Moore plays slot primarily. He's the receiver that's closer to the quarterback. He's the receiver that wins off yak. Curtis Samuel can do that, but is also, as Matt Harmon will tell you, very, very good at separating, plays that outside role, and is much deeper down the field. I actually haven't compared their ADOTs, but I imagine if I do, I would see that Curtis Samuel's ADOT is significantly more than what DJ Moore's was, at least when you look at it from a career perspective. For that reason, there was one wide receiver in that tandem of wide receivers that was able to thrive in a situation with a quarterback without a big arm in Kyle Allen. And then there was one that still beat his man time and time again, but just wasn't able to kind of benefit from that stylistic fit in the same way that DJ Moore was.
So Curtis Samuel ranked 11th in target distance, 17th in average target distance, 23rd in target separation, 30th in contested catch rate. Like, he is a good wide receiver by a lot of metrics. He just didn't get the targets, nor did he get, obviously, the quality targets. So his target quality, 4.2. He was ranked 101st in target quality. So that should tell you a ton about his season. And like Eitan said, look at his air yards. So they will probably bring Cam back. I would be very surprised if they didn't. They're bringing in Rule from Baylor, who is obviously a guy who likes to air it out. He's going as they are, all three of these guys are literally back to back to back. It's Cooks, Green, and then Curtis Samuel right behind him. Curtis Samuel's only 23 years old, entering his fourth season now. I mean, he's really entering his third season because he got that injury as a rookie. But I mean, could he put up top 36 numbers? Absolutely. Could he put up top 24 numbers? We'll see with this new offense. But the fact remains is that he can definitely, guys like N'Keal Harry, Laviska Shenault, T.Y. Hilton's going ahead of him, T. Higgins, Henry Ruggs, like these rookies are going ahead of him. I would take a shot here because it's not like you're spending a ton of draft capital. You're not going to be spending a ton of trade capital or rookie draft capital to get him. So he's definitely a post-hype sleeper that I would be looking at.
Anytime you can buy young veterans, you have to understand that you're just increasing your flexibility down the line by buying somebody that's established as being a player in this league that can perform to a certain level at such a young age. Because a lot of these rookies that you're going to be drafting right now, the single best case scenario is you're getting a rookie that's 2 years younger than a guy that you've already got that's got 2 years of seasoning in the NFL. You're going to make money on that. You're going to profit on selling him at a later date, almost no matter what happens from here on out, unless he gets injured, and then it's a whole different thing. Unless he gets seriously career-altering injured, you're going to make your money back on that type of acquisition. So if you're building, then this is definitely a player that you want on your team.
Just FYI, he is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He's ninth in air yards. He was ninth in air yards this season, which is a big indicator about a receiver's ability.
1,608 air yards last season compared
ahead of DeAndre Hopkins, ahead of Keenan Allen, ahead of DJ Moore, ahead of Michael Thomas, Amari Cooper, Cortland Sutton, Stephon Diggs. List goes on.
Definitely a guy post-hype that you can still buy, you can still profit on moving forward. All right, that is going to be the end of our little discussion today. We're now going to do what we do best. We're going to plug
you see, he even forgets what we call these little segments.
We're going to forgot what it's called.
What did we just get done with? The 5-point inspection. You forgot what it was called.
We're going to plug the analyzer and get to this week's Dynasty Diagnostic, ladies and gentlemen. I at least remember what that is. It'd be sad if I didn't. It's episode 57, and this week's roster.
58.
Is it episode 58? It's episode 58.
This is why, oh my God. Now he's flustered. This is going to be, it's going downhill from here on.
Episode 58 was submitted by Trozener, which is Ryan Trozen. Go ahead and follow him on Twitter. If you want to be part of next week's show, all you have to do is leave us a rating, review, send us your roster. Go ahead and DM it to the Dynasty Diagnostic, Dino Diagnostic on Twitter, and we will be able to get your roster on the show. It is a super flex, full point per reception, 12-team roster, and it looks like at quarterback, we have Baker Mayfield, Derek Carr, and Sam Darnold. Obviously, Baker Mayfield last year was not the year so many predicted for him. It didn't manifest itself just in Baker Mayfield. That went also directly to Odell Beckham Jr. Both of their values seemingly took a hit this season. Both of their values were probably inflated a little too much last season. I think true value lies somewhere in between. Baker Mayfield, for me, is still a quarterback that you probably want to be acquiring on your teams. In fact, you can get him this year at a much, much cheaper rate than you could get him last year. And I think he's probably going to do better for you this year than he did last year, not for anything else, just because of, again, the talent that he has on this team, which was the same argument for him last season. He's acquirable. You already have him on this team. I don't think he's a guy that you need to replace. I think Sam Darnold kind of fits into the same mold. I don't necessarily think that Sam Darnold's going to have as good surrounding pieces as Baker Mayfield is going to have. Robbie Anderson, of course, could leave that team. If that happens, then we're really looking at what? Quincy Enunwa at number one wide receiver. And
they're picking a wide receiver in this.
Exactly. No way they go ahead and draft somebody, but then you're relying on a rookie to be that guy in year one. So I think that's a different thing. But I do think that with Mayfield and Darnold, you have a solid base at QB. The problem with this is I don't think you have ceiling at QB as currently constructed. I think you have solid contenders, solid kind of plug-and-play pieces. I don't necessarily think that you're going to want to be starting both of these quarterbacks on a weekly basis. And so my question to you, Sam, is there a guy out there that's acquirable, still acquirable, because I think guys like Ryan Tannehill at this point are maybe not, just because of the year that he had, that can kind of give you that upside at the quarterback position for this year, or are you fine with it?
Matt Stafford. Bye, Matt Stafford. He was the QB3 in points per game last season before he got injured. Glad they held him out. I mean, he's getting Marvin. He has another year. He has a second year TJ Hawkinson. He still has Kenny Golladay, who is a top 12 wide receiver in the league, probably a top 10 wide receiver if we're being realistic. He's getting Marvin Jones back. I don't think he might not have been injured when Stafford or before Stafford left. But regardless, you have two great outside wide receivers. You have a second year tight end who is a great pass catcher. You have good pass catcher in Kerryon Johnson. They'll probably bring in another running back as well. And that line actually kept him relatively healthy. Right now in Superflex, he is going as the QB 17. Sorry, getting a little bit better there. Still extremely acquirable. I would rather have Matt Stafford over Jimmy G. I would have him over Cam Newton. Let's see who else is there. Probably Jared Goff at this point. Probably Daniel Jones at this point. And this is not like in terms. Hold on. This is in terms of the near future. I'm not saying as a dynasty asset, but if you want to make this a win now team, Matt Stafford will give you that solid QB1 status that you need, because I think Mayfield is a buy right now. I think Darnold is a buy right now. Carr is the question mark here, because it sounds like Oakland wants to move on if they're willing to offer 41-year-old Tom Brady 2-year, $30 million a year contract. So he may not be starting this year. So you definitely need that solid QB1. If you can get somebody like Matt Stafford, I would be doing that in a heartbeat.
And a lot of people think that Matt Stafford is on the chopping block, that he may not be there this year.
No, he will. They have.
Just like a lot of people have said that David Johnson might not be there. And again, I have to go back to, okay, we have to go back to reality a little bit. We have to look at the contracts here. We have to look at the money. We have to look at what the money says. $32 million dead cap versus a $21 million cap hit. $21 million for a quarterback of Matthew Stafford's ilk is ridiculous. But what's even more ridiculous is the fact that you would have to essentially lose $11 million on that transaction if you were to have that guy not on your team. He's definitely going to be there is what I'm saying. So there's no issue there if that is something in the back of your mind that has you considering. He's going to be there with Kenny Golladay, and for that reason, I believe he's a huge pickup. I think the obvious answer here is one of two guys. It's either Matthew Stafford or Jameis Winston. It's whatever your risk tolerance is.
These three are going back to back. I think Kirk Cousins is another one where it's just like, okay, I don't understand the disrespect he's getting. That dude has put up good numbers in back-to-back seasons. He's put up QB1 numbers in back-to-back seasons with Minnesota. Like, I get it. Like, he's not this, over the top, I'm going to be fantastic quarterback, but he's still putting up QB1 numbers. Who the fuck cares?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, you just want guys that have the weapons or have the innate ability to give you those boom weeks. I think what you've got right now is a good base. You just need a little boom. All right, so let's move on. Let's go to the next section here. And at running back, we have Alvin Kamara, Kenyon Drake, Nyheim Hines, Rashad Penny, Benny Snell, Darwin Thompson, Travion Williams. I'm worried. I'm really worried about this running back room. I obviously like Alvin Kamara. I think Kenyon Drake is going to be a starter somewhere, even if he splits reps with somebody. But beyond that, I don't see anybody that's really giving you any faith in what you've got at the RB room. And Alvin Kamara is pretty much known to miss a game or two here and there. Kenyon Drake has never really gotten a full year's load, so we don't necessarily know what he's going to be like injury-wise when it comes to that. You definitely need some additions here at running back, and I think some of the cheap additions are probably guys that we mentioned last week. I think Marlon Mack is a cheap addition that you could probably get a year or two starting from. I think that you might be able to get Kareem Hunt maybe a little bit cheaper than you had in the past, with him being likely to stay in town and do the same thing that he did last year, which was essentially be a value receiver and a weapon at the goal line. I think that's somebody that can slot into your RB3 really well, with a chance to potentially grow into an RB1 at some point somewhere if the Cleveland Browns can't go ahead and continue to pay them both when Chubb eventually becomes a guy that they have to spend money on off his rookie deal. I think that you need to look at an RB1 for that RB3 role on this team, but not necessarily an RB1 for fantasy, just an RB1 on their team. Is there a guy out there that you think is being undervalued right now that you can add to this team and still pretty much guarantee some sort of level of production for at least this coming season?
Philip Lindsay. RB32 in drafts right now. RB32.
That's disgraceful. Philip Lindsay has shown for 2 seasons now that
2 seasons. He's small. I get it. Whatever. The dude produces. And Pat Shurmur has already said we need to get the ball in Philip Lindsay's hands more often, which means that he's going to pass the ball to Philip Lindsay. I won't say I will do everything but guarantee Philip Lindsay gets a 50 reception season this season.
And
but anyway, I
don't take too much on the ground either, so I think that's definitely a good buy there.
I would be selling Kenyon Drake right now, honestly. I think that the David Johnson cut hype might have boosted Kenyon Drake's value a little bit.
Kenyon Drake is a free agent. I don't know why people keep thinking that Kenyon
know.
Drake is still on that team. Kenyon Drake is a free agent. Every word that we've heard from that front office is David Johnson's going to be here, which again is because of the money. He has to be there. But beyond that, everything about Kenyon Drake has been glowing. They've been saying, oh, they love him, but they don't even know if they can bring him back. So I think you need to understand that Kenyon Drake, if you're attributing his value to being an Arizona Cardinal, then you shouldn't be doing that. But if you're attributing his value to just being a solid running back, also feel safe and feel comfort in the fact that running backs tend to do well immediately on new teams as long as they find themselves in solid situations with solid lines and decent offenses. That's all you have to hope for. With the wide receiver, it's a lot more complicated. With a running back, I think it's a little bit less so.
I fully agree. So point being that I would sell him for Kenyon Drake is going as the kind of in the early 20s among running backs. I would sell Kenyon Drake for, if you can, Phillip Lindsay plus. Get Phillip Lindsay in a second, and I'm doing that all day.
Absolutely.
But I mean, that ultimately doesn't help you. It gets you more assets here. But the fact remains is that at that point, you would have two starters and then nothing else behind him. So you need to get at least one more, probably two more running backs. We can talk about your draft assets, and I would be trading those because of the hype around this draft class, because it is a super flex. I would be trading those to help your team, but we can talk about that later. But you do need to you need to get at least two more starting running backs. Well, at least one more starting running back and another guy that might share the backfield. I mean, ideas, Mark Ingram. Again, this is more of a win now type scenario. Mark Ingram, Marlon Mack. Marlon Mack's going as RB25. I don't know if there's any indication that the Colts are going to spend high draft capital to get a running back. And Marlon Mack has been fantastic the last two seasons.
We thought they would last year.
And they didn't. I mean, he's not going to catch passes, but when you have Alvin Kamara who will catch passes, if you can get somebody like Phillip Lindsay or another pass catcher, get him. He will catch passes. Marlon Mack, you just need a solid guy that's going to give you double-digit fantasy points basically every week. Marlon Mack can do that. Who else? I'm probably going to get pushback on this, but Raheem Mostert shares a backfield, but he was far and away the best San Francisco 49er running back. Now, I get it. He's sharing a backfield with at least one more running back in Tevin Coleman if they keep him. They'll probably bring in another guy, but Raheem Mostert was far and away the best running back that the 49ers had. They are going to run the ball. That's how they are built right now. Raheem Mostert, if you are looking for like an RB4, perfect fit.
Yeah, I really just think you need a guy atop the depth chart. I mean, beyond that, I wouldn't look too much into it. I wouldn't look into really heavily investing in RB, period, just because things can change so quickly. But having a guy like Alvin Kamara at least gives you the flexibility to take a flyer on those guys that you think may be viable, maybe for 1 or 2 years, and still be okay because you kind of still have at least one piece that you would assume – I mean, in 2022, is still going to be kicking. So
also, if you want to buy two late guys, like two cheap guys right now, Boston Scott and Justin Jackson, because you're not spending any semblance of draft capital on them. Boston Scott can step into a major pass catching role for the Eagles, and Justin Jackson, I mean, depending on what the Chargers do, can fill in a pretty big role for the Chargers with Melvin Gordon very likely gone.
And if you're buying uncertainty, Melvin Gordon also can be somebody that you're targeting. I don't think he's going to cost you an arm and a leg. I think James Conner, again, if you're not risk averse, is a guy that you can kind of buy on a dip right now when his future's kind of up in the air. You just have to understand the risks that you're taking when you're taking them. Just kind of know what you're getting yourself into. That way you can build the rest of your team accordingly. But with Alvin Kamara, with Kenyon Drake, all you really need is one extra piece, I think, is what me and Sam are saying, to at least get you over the line for this season, and then you can kind of work it out moving forward. With those picks that you have, you could even solve that pretty easily just using one of those and getting those at the cheapest that they're possibly going to be for the next couple of years. So there's lots of things that you can do to help this RB room. Wide receiver for me is a little bit more complicated because I really see one wide receiver here that I have faith in. Now, I think that a few things can happen with other wide receivers here, but I don't necessarily know what's going to happen next. Dante Pettis, Dante Pettis really shouldn't be seen as an asset anymore for me. Kenny Stills, perennially underutilized, kind of in a crowded wide receiver group, but still a very, very good wide receiver if you're having him at maybe as a wide receiver 4. JJ Arcega-Whiteside, I don't think any of us know what he is yet. We would say that, yes, last year was his rookie year, and rookie years don't necessarily mean a grand whole lot of things, but at the same time, if you have all that opportunity and you're not able to produce really anything, I think that's kind of a nail in the confidence sorts. I really do think that you want to see some level of production if you're seeing a guy that's getting opportunity. The problem with rookies is oftentimes they don't necessarily get the time to flash that talent until later in their careers. But if they have everybody else on their team injured and they're supposed to be the guy and they're not even getting play time to undrafted rookies, I think that that's a real issue for J-Jaw. N'Keal Harry, we don't know what's happening with Tom Brady. We don't know what's happening with the Patriots as a whole. A lot of people that still value N'Keal Harry value him highly because of his breakout age and the fact that he checked kind of all the analytics boxes last season. I do think that for that reason, that's still a guy that you think can have a future, but I wouldn't necessarily pencil him in as anything higher than a wide receiver 4 either. A.J. Brown obviously is probably the wide receiver 1 on this team. Anthony Miller, I think with the release of Taylor Gabriel, I don't necessarily think that means a whole new world for a guy like Anthony Miller, but I do think that opened up a little bit more. Maybe we can see consistent wide receiver 3 numbers from him. D.D. Westbrook is another guy that's kind of in that same mold. Nelson Aguilar, Kelvin Harmon, Tyrell Williams, Keyshawn Johnson, Juwan Winfrey, Scott Miller, Alan Lazard. You're hoping a lot of things go right in this wide receiver room, and I don't necessarily know if that's wise. I think that you need to trade for some established talent at wide receiver. On this team, I think that I would probably keep AJ. I know that I've said to kind of sell him before to kind of just maximize the number of assets that you can get back for him with all the hype that's around him. But I think on this team, I think this is kind of a little bit more of a rebuilding project, and you're going to need him for the long haul. And for that reason, I'd be using my picks to fill this wide receiver room more than anything else before I even tackle RB for me anyway. What about you? What would you do with this wide receiver room?
So this wide receiver room makes me rethink this entire squad. This team honestly looks like a rebuild at this point because you're just too many pieces away. Because let's be real, you can't really fully trust your quarterbacks. You only have 2 startable running backs right now. You have 2, maybe 3 startable wide receivers. And while this can get you a starting lineup with the lineups that you're required, you don't have any depth. Like there's no depth. And while I like N'Keal Harry as a second season buy, I even like J-Jaw as a second season buy just because he's going to be so cheap that it's worth it. You don't have anything to hold on to here. And then, you have Kittle and Gesicki, which, your tight end room is your best part of this, but it's not tight end premium. So you need to sell. You need to sell Kamara. You need to sell Kenyon Drake. I would probably be selling Derek Carr for anything right now. In a super flex, you might be able to get a first. If not, you'll probably get a second. Good Lord. I would still probably sell Mayfield because I think Mayfield's value right now is still relatively high because people believe in him, especially after his rookie season. Baker Mayfield's going as QB7 right now in Superflex. So I would be selling Baker Mayfield. Get somebody like Drew Lock plus for Baker Mayfield. Sell, but I mean, you need to sell your big assets here. Sell Kamara for a ton. Sell Drake.
Kamara would be my number one sell.
What? Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, Kamara. I think Kamara, Mayfield, maybe Dede, and Kittle are all sells to me.
I feel like the only reason that I'm not kind of going full fire sell at all is because I think that there are a few pieces here that you can build with. Like,
no, I agree.
Mayfield can regain a lot of value this year and would still be very valuable for your team 5 years out. So for that reason, I probably wouldn't sell him. But I mean, a guy like George Kittle, like you mentioned, in a non-tight end premium, absolutely on this team needs to go.
I say sell Mayfield, but it's because I'm not a big fan of Mayfield's talent. I'm just not. I haven't been.
Well established.
So yeah, I mean, if you believe in his talent, if you believe his rookie year is closer to what he is than what last year is, then sure, keep him, keep Darnold. You can sell Carr for something. Definitely sell Kamara and definitely sell Kittle. So Kamara, Drake, Carr, Kittle are the four that you should be selling right now, 4 picks and players. With Kamara, I would be trying to buy young wide receivers. With Kittle, I would be trying to buy young wide receivers and picks. So Kamara, you can get 2020 and 2021 picks and probably a young wide receiver. Same with Kittle. And that would put you because and we'll just move on here. So at tight end, he had Kittle, Gesicki, Kahale, Warren. I mean, Gesicki's great. Like he should be a top buy at tight end right now, but sell Kittle. And then let's get into his picks here. He has 3 2020 firsts, 1.01, 1.02, and 1.11 as his 3 first round picks in 2020. I think you could probably get a couple more with guys like Kamara, Drake, Carr, and Kittle. If you can get, let's just say 4 first round picks and a couple 2021 firsts and plus a couple young wide receivers, then you're set to start rebuilding. And then you can pick 1 or 2 quarterbacks in this class. You can pick 1 or 2 running backs in this class, and your rebuild has started off on a hot foot right there.
That's definitely kind of the easiest way to go with this team. I do think that with the 101, of course, you can get Burrow. So Mayfield, Burrow, Darnold. I think that's fine at quarterback. With the 103, you're going to be able to get a running back. So I think you can get Taylor, you can get
102. So you can get one of the top 3 running backs with that.
Exactly. So you have your quarterback and running back room kind of set. Wide receiver, I mean, 111, 201, and 206 can be spent on wide receiver in this class, and I think you're going to get decent at that. But for me, I'm probably selling 111 on. But at 101 and 103, I think that you can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone here and not necessarily have to sell the farm to be able to be competitive. Not this year, because your wide receiver room is going to still need help, but going into next season. So, yeah, I do think that with 3 2020 first, you're still in a decent situation. But, I mean, wide receiver is going to be the one that kills you because it's going to take time for wide receivers to be consistent assets. And you don't want the rest of your team to get older before – one single but very, very important part of your team has the ability to at least get you even scores on a week-to-week basis.
What do you think about selling like 111 and Derek Carr to try and move up in the first?
Who are you moving up for?
I mean, you could go with Tua. You could go with another running back. I mean, if you could somehow get in the top 5 with 111 plus Derek Carr, I don't know if it's possible. It's just I'm just throwing it out there.
It's probably 111, Drake. It's probably 111.
Okay, regardless. Okay, fine. Then you can get somehow. Let's say you can get Joe Burrows. You can get Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, and then you can get somebody like Cam Akers or J.K. Dobbins. And then if you can somehow get one more pick in there and somehow get Tua or even Justin Herbert, I think you've started out fantastic in terms of this rebuild.
Yeah, it's wide receiver that you're gonna have to work on. Obviously, we mentioned Curtis Samuel is a buy. I think Marquise Brown is still a buy. I think a lot of people are down on him because of injuries. I would be spending, second round picks on a guy like Brandon Cooks just because he's still only 26, 27 years old. There's potential for that to go another way, and I really think it's kind of a scattershot approach that you need to take to this because you have guys that could potentially be, your 1 and 2 already on the team. You need a little bit of certainty when it comes to, a week in, week out type performer. And I think a guy like Cooks that's done it before, if he can get anywhere near that level again, then, that's at least a wide receiver 3 for you. And you can kind of move on from there without spending too much.
Even established guys, though. DJ Chark is going as a wide receiver 26 currently. Tyler Boyd is 25 years old and going as a wide receiver 28. Like,
people are making me mad with Tyler Boyd. Like, I don't know what else he has to
do. As you mentioned, Marquise Brown. Curtis Samuel's only 23. Like, there are a lot of young wide receivers right now going late that you can really buy cheap. Preston Williams, wide receiver 54. Like, buy those type of guys. He already has Anthony Miller. Never mind. You keep Anthony Miller. But yeah, you get the idea though, is these guys are still young. There's a lot of guys who have already established themselves that are still young. Allen Robinson right now is going as a wide receiver 19. He's only 26 years old.
I think the point we're trying to say is with this particular position group on this particular team, under these settings, it's wise for you to kind of value quantity over quality. I don't think you should be looking at a particular guy or two to add to this team. I think you should be looking at, tier levels and just trying to pick out 2 or 3 that are going to add to the numbers on this team and give you the potential to, down the line, eventually have those solid performers start to be more consistent for you.
Agreed.
All right, so that is going to be the end of our Dynasty Diagnostic. But before we get to the end of the show, we're going to do what we always do, and I'm going to throw this over to you, Sam. What is this team?
So this kind of reminds me of Dodge Charger, Dodge Challenger, those kind of muscle cars. Like, looks really good when you just look at it at first. You have Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, which are names. You have Alvin Kamara, Kenyon Drake, which are really good names from last year. You have AJ Brown, you have N'Keal Harry, and then you have George Kittle. But so on the surface, it's like, oh, this looks great. It's shiny, it's clean. It's a muscle car. People love it. But what you don't realize is this person doesn't know jack shit. And I'm not saying like the owner right now knows jack shit about fantasy football, but doesn't know anything about cars and hasn't changed their oil in 15,000 miles. So it's like black tar, and they've got like metal shavings in their transmission box and stuff like that. And it's just like about to explode. And I think that's where we're at. It looks good on like right at the surface, but below the surface, this thing is going to break down at any moment.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that. It's a really nice exterior. It's like, I don't know, it's like Mercedes that it's like a early 2000s Mercedes that still did hood ornaments. Has a really, really nice hood ornament, but you go inside the car and you realize like the paneling is falling off. Like, just like Sam was saying, it's one of those things that's going to be attractive. Like, if this was an orphan team that you picked up, this is a good orphan team that you picked up. Like, I really commend you for that, because you can do a lot with what you have here and still be competitive fairly soon. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done to get this kind of driving, get this going where it really needs to go. So, yeah, I fully agree with that. I think you've got the hood ornament. You just need more substance to that. And once you get a little bit of depth at running back, once you get a little bit of depth at wide receiver, I think that there are ways that you can go with this. Scattershot it, man. All you need is to get bodies in the door at wide receiver to at least get this team competing. And then from that, you can refine it and start to individualize the pieces that you want to add to really take this team to the next level. But this approach is not about looking at one or two guys. This approach is about figuring out how to make a solid base at wide receiver and then go from there, because you have a base everywhere else. And I think that's the main takeaway from all of this. This isn't a bad team. I really do think that you did well. I just think that there is a little bit ways to go here. But that's not going to be an issue for you if you do this intelligently. And that is going to be the end of our show, ladies and gentlemen. Before we return the keys, I really just wanted to say we really appreciate everybody that listens to this podcast. Really appreciate everybody that gave us a platform to go ahead and speak about football. There's so many things that are being said in the Twitter community. There's so much kind of vitriol. There's so much going back and forth. I really do think that this is a hobby that we all enjoy, that has given us an outlet for a lot of things that are maybe a little bit more stressful in our lives. And for that reason, we should kind of have that level of respect when interacting with other analysts, when interacting with other people, when interacting with people that you might feel are more or less knowledgeable than you. I think it just comes down to understanding that this is something that we can all share. There's so much division already in this country. There's so many things that kind of tear us apart. I think football is kind of the one thing that we can kind of look at all together and at least feel relatively passionate about, knowledgeable about, and feel like it's a way to kind of get away from maybe the more serious things in life. So I just encourage everyone to be positive and be encouraged, as my man J Mike would say, when interacting with anybody else on the Twitter sphere or in real life. There's so much going around that use this as what I think it's designed to be, which is a way to bring people that otherwise wouldn't have interaction with each other together and continue to be what you expect to see from one another. So I would just kind of leave that here.
Nah, quit. Let me add. Yeah, quit being a fuckboy.
Or as Stompy said, everything I said essentially is what Stompy said. Quit being a fuckboy. That's probably going to be the name of the show. That has to be at this point.
That's fine.
But yeah, that is going to be the end of our show. Thank you so much for listening to us again. Thank you for making it to the Dynasty Diagnostic Service Center today. Please be sure to keep up with all your scheduled maintenance and catch us next time to ensure quality performance. See you on your next visit.